Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kiln. My name is Kane, and today I want to share with you a journaling exercise that has really helped me better understand the tools that I use and are at my disposal as a dungeon master or as a player. This exercise that I want to walk you through, and I hope you'll follow along with, is called What is on my Dungeon Master's Control Board. So if you have your journal nearby or a piece of paper and a pen, grab one and let's do this together as I explain how this works. The first thing that you need to understand with this exercise is that we're trying to identify tools that we use as well as kind of a grade on how well we use them so that we can understand what to focus on and what we do well. So there's three different kind of categories. And so what you have is, I'm just going to write kind of the symbols over here on the left, is the first category is a button. Okay, this button is something that you understand, something that you've learned from a game, the system that you're running, a technique that you've learned from another player or another GM or something you've seen in action or whatever. This button is something that you know about, you could technically implement, but it's kind of a one and done. You have to remember to push that button and then you drop it into your game. It goes into effect and then it stops and then it kind of goes away until you push that button again. The next option, the next kind of level up, is a toggle. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a little toggle here. And essentially what this is moving from a button, it moves up to more of a switch or a toggle where you can learn, you know how to do something, a technique or a principle or a tool, and you can slide it on or off, and it's an ongoing aspect of your games. But depending on what the game is, you can turn it on and off whenever you need. So hopefully it's kind of a set it and forget it type experience. And we'll give you some examples in just a second. Then the last option is more of a dial. So what that is it's a technique or a tool that has some variation. You can fine tune it as you're going throughout your game, or depending on what the feel you want, you can fine tune it to meet your needs. It's kind of like dialing up certain things from 1 to an 11 or whatever. Now, the exercise is identifying what buttons, toggles, and dials are already on your control board, right? Because right now I have a blank control board. I'm new or whatever. I haven't established what I know. And so the first thing is, as I learn something, I'm going to add a button to my control board. So something, for example, is remembering how to use, say, like a timer. Okay, so we'll save this, and this panel will be kind of our example space. So if I learn the concepts of a timer from Index Card RPG, for example, it's something that I'm familiar with. It's a technique that I could use, but maybe I don't use it every time in my session. I have to remember to go, oh yeah, this would be a good moment for a timer. Boop. Push the button, I roll a d4, and now I have a timer going in the game. But then once that timer is up, the timer goes away, and there's no more timers in my games. It's a button. So every time I push it, I can remember to use a timer. And these buttons are great things for things that you want to drop in your game for temporary use or whatever. But then if you remember that they're there, awesome. If you don't, they're still on your control board. Technically, you could use them, but you have to kind of remember to keep pushing that button. From there, if I wanted to increase my ability to use timers, I would practice, try to implement them, and push that button often enough that eventually I turn that button into a toggle. And so now this timer toggle is something where I turn it on and off. And what that looks like is now I've learned that instead of just having to push the button whenever I want to have a timer, I turn the timer toggle on, and now I just have like ongoing D4 timers at all times. Every D4 rounds, I roll in another D4, something is going to happen, changes the scene, it's enemies appear, whatever. I've learned to have an ongoing timer. I've turned that toggle on, and then if I ever had a session or things where I want to turn it off, I just turn it off on purpose, and then no more timers in the game until I turn it back on. As I progress from a button to a toggle, I've gained a little bit more control over my ability to use this particular tool as a dungeon master. And the final step is eventually I want to turn that toggle into a dial, where now instead of just a blanket on off, I'm using D4 timers, I can now add variations to this principle of timers. What this looks like is maybe I know how to use a timer not only as a D4 just in the scene, but maybe I know how to use a world timer. Maybe I know how to use D8s to D20s. Maybe I know how to implement timers for individuals, individual timers. Maybe I know how to use spawn count, spawn scenes, as well as environmental timers. You can see that now I have a lot more control to dial in what I want and how I want to use this timer in the scene to get the experience that I want. It could be different variations like this one, world, different lengths, different types, or it's just the amount that they impact the scene. Maybe in certain games, I want to have timers be there, but I don't want them to have a huge impact. But maybe I want to have other games where the timer and the duration of the scenes are really impactful, and that's a big part of the game. And so my ability to control that timer is a dial that I can dial in or out, dial up to 11 or dial back down. So that's kind of our example, transitioning or developing from a button to a toggle to a timer. Now the exercise itself is thinking about all the tools that you have at your disposal as a dungeon master and as a GM or as a player, learning where they are in this process. So for example, I might have a couple buttons like one of my buttons that I have to purposely and intentionally remember is to include RP in my games. It's not a natural thing. I have to remember to push that button and say, oh, this is an RP moment. Oh, I want to include an NPC that they can talk to. And every time I'm doing that, I'm pushing that button. And I have to remember to do that. It's not a toggle or it's not a dial. It's a button for me. Another button that might come into play for me is maybe I'm doing something along the lines of treats. I have to remember to include a treat in my game every time. It's like, okay, purposely put in a treat. Maybe I'm doing the same kind of thing. I have to remember treats, and I can go on and on with different stuff. Like if I were to look at the GM guide for Index Card RPG, it's a great way of learning or identifying different tools. So if I look at the GM section of Master Edition here, maybe for example, easy and hard is something that for me I think about and go, oh yeah, no, I know how to use easy and hard. That's a dial for me. I know how to fine tune easy and hard. So I'm going to come down here and write a dial. That's specifically for easy, hard. But maybe I only know how to do session end rolls. Like I can turn those on, and so I've got a session end roll is my toggle. They're either there or they're not. I have to turn them on or they're off. Session end rolls. Okay, continuing on through some of the other elements of the GM's guide. Another button that I can put down is dynamic dice. I know how to do them. I just have to remember to push that button to include them in my game. Hero coins. I've got a good handle on hero coins. I know when to hand them out. I know how to hand them out, different ways to hand them out or whatever. So this other dial over here is for hero coins. Let's see. And you can get more specific. Instead of just saying dynamic dice, maybe I'm really good at using Spellburn, but Battle Fury and the Blunder is not my forte. Another tile that I might have is Danger. Danger from the Do. Okay. as well as duration. I've got a really good handle on duration as a GM. I know how to pace. I know how to keep things moving. I know how to slow things down. I have a good handle on duration. But you know what? Like, I really am not that experienced at different ways of doing damage. Like, I'm really one of my challenges is learning how to not just have pools of health that players have to kind of slog through. So damage instead of a button is, I always have damage in my games, but it's kind of a one and done thing where I turn it on, it's this kind of damage, it's combat damage or whatever. But the other ones that I might have is I've got, timers. I'm really good at my timers. So like up here, so I've got my timers again. And this is just an exercise that you're working through. So as I'm just doing this, think about what you as a GM or even as a player, you could have a different control board for as a player versus as a GM. And you're just slowly working through what you're good at, what you want. I can put and make this visually whatever I want my control board to look like. Oh, disruption. That was another one. I'm kind of okay at disruption. It's either in my games or it's kind of not. So it's either on or off. So I've got my disruption toggle. Another button that I can include is encounter archetypes. A big button that I really struggle to include is just like NPCs in general. Like boop, boop. I have to remember to drop those in there and include them as something that they can actually interact with. And this goes on and on. So eventually I get a control board with whatever I'm good at, what I focus on. It gives me a very visual key in that, well, these are my strengths. These are what I really have a good handle on and can implement in my game in different ways versus things that I'm okay with. I've become more familiar with that. And here's the things that are there. Now, this exercise is not designed to only highlight what you have to work on. Yes, we want to continually improve, but this is a game, so this is more informative, and you can use this as a tool to inform where you want to practice with or whatever. But it also is just a good way of realizing, hey, you know what? There's a lot of variation that I can include in my games in different ways. So now that I have this visual control board and I've got blank spaces for new things that I want to learn from new systems, from new encounters, from new GMs and new players as they drop in new things, I can add more stuff to my control board. But now, as I'm thinking about my planning as a GM, I can look at it and go, oh, you know what? I do have a really good handle on danger, but you know what? Maybe I'm going to turn that dial down this time. And maybe I'm going to increase how quickly we move in. So it's going to be a fast-paced game, but the danger is going to be kind of low. The timers, I don't necessarily want it to have like a huge impact, so maybe I'm going to dial it down, but this duration is still going to be important. I really want to make sure the session end roll is key, so I'm going to make sure that's on. I'm going to turn off some damage, so we're not running there, but disruption is a big thing. So now I have a game that's fast paced. There's things that are going to get away. It's kind of a stressful chase type experience or whatever, as well as maybe I'm going to make sure I'm going to hit that RP button plenty versus going in, okay, I'm going to turn duration down. I'm going to turn danger up. I'm going to turn damage back on. I want to make it really easy and hard, given the plenty of things. I want to play really well with the hero coins, turn disruption down. Let's push that archetype button plenty of times in the game, and we'll go from there. So this can provide a visual clue in to controls that you can maneuver and manipulate to get different feels for your games. And that's where I think is really exciting, both as a tool for improvement and development as a GM, but also just as a tool to work through some ideas on how to change things up, how to make your games a little bit more dynamic, a little like adding some more variation to what you do. So instead of just always turning the danger up, turning the damage up, turning the direction up, like putting the pedal to the metal, high stakes, all that kind of stuff, you can manipulate, you can control things a lot because you have a lot of tools at your disposal. So why not recognize what you can do with them and how you can use them? And that's really the benefit of this this activity of what is on your Dungeon Master control board. Learning how to use these tools, learning what you're good at, where you can focus on, how you can change things up to get different effects. And I like having a physical thing to kind of just work through. And so I can continue on adding more buttons, more toggles, more dials as time goes on. And eventually I'm going to get a full control board. An example of this is one I did the other day for the kiln. As an example, this is another one where my disruption is high. I've got challenge tuning handled. I've got a really good handle on fantasy, but other systems I'm not so good at. I'm really good at ICRPG, but I've got to really push those buttons to get using something like Shadow Dark or Low Fantasy Gaming or Castle Focus or whatever. Hero coins are there, dangers there, treats, targets, all that stuff. So it can vary, and over time your control board will change. It will change up, but I would love to see your control boards. If you want, feel free to just grab that paper, grab that pen, sit down and work through this activity. If you're on the Kane's Kiln Discord, please drop in a picture. Love to see what you're focusing on, what highlights it is, and then maybe eventually you can continue to add more tools and more dials and buttons and whatever. But what do you think? Let's keep working on all the things that we have going on for us. And for now, I'm going to see you guys back in the kiln, and we'll catch you guys next time.